Hello, Steve.
Hi, Serge. How are
How are
you?
you? I'm good. Again, I'm good and looking forward to our interview today. That we've got a
Hmm.
very interesting woman who I knew 40 years ago. We worked together in California over 40 years
Oh,
ago, and I
wow.
haven't
Wow.
seen her since then, called
Wow.
Susan Campbell. And we're going to learn a lot about her because
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to remind you listeners again that while we're calling our video Fierce Grace because of that 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 we see all the challenges that are around us in the world today as expressions of grace, that this is a podcast on exploring the many faces of spirituality and how we can bring a greater spirituality into our lives. Would you agree, Steve?
I agree completely. Yeah. I think when I listen to some spiritual teachers, they
Mhm.
only talk about consciousness or awakening, and it can get a little bit repetitive sometimes. But I think spirituality is so interesting because you can apply it to any area of life. So what I like to do in my work is to apply spirituality to different areas of our lives, relationships, day-to-day activities, music, creativity, psychological and cultural aspects like warfare, hierarchy, and patriarchy. All of these are, they can be illuminated by spirituality. So I think it's really important to use spirituality as a spotlight, which can transform your view of different aspects of human life. So that's what I feel we're doing in this podcast.
And Steve, thank you for saying that because that's exactly what Susan is all about. She's brought spirituality into the business world, into the relationship world, into all sorts of things, as you'll
Mhm.
hear when we meet her now.
Yeah, let's welcome
Okay,
Susan to our podcast.
Susan, hello.
Hello, Susan.
Susan, hello there.
Hello, I was just trying to get my speaker on.
Ah,
Uh,
Susan, how wonderful to see you. My old friend, I
Yeah,
have not seen you for over 40 years.
gee, it
wow.
doesn't seem like that long, Serge.
Hey,
Wow.
and 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 we're still rocking and rolling.
We are. Yeah, still
I
crazy
mean,
after all these years.
still crazy after all those years. And so I'm so delighted to see you, and I'm so delighted to be having this interview with you because we're going to be learning a lot about you, Susan, because you've been someone who's been very dedicated to many areas of the path of relationship, group work, the business world, old age. So I'd like to start by just reading out what you sent me so that people will just have a general view about you, if that's okay, Susan. Um, since 1995, I've facilitated groups called honesty salons. These are small communities of practice where participants agree to use a set of communication practices that assist us in developing deeper self-awareness, a felt sense of belonging to a larger we, healing from trauma, and working skillfully with conflict. I'm the author of 11 books on change, conflict, community, and relationships, and I've created 3 card games that teach valuable communication tools. I'm 85. Congratulations, Susan. Wow. And I'm interested in how to navigate the final stages of life for individuals and systems, finding one's right relationship to societal breakdown, loss, and death. Susan, you're engaged in life in a very holistic and full way. And let me just ask you, what is responsible for the fact that you're still rocking and rolling at 85, as opposed to sort of going like this with a Zimmer frame, like a lot of our contemporaries? I mean, is it your love of life that's kept you, your spiritual vision? I'm fascinated.
Well, I do love life, and I do love exchanging with the world. I just get gratification out of this human life. I'm so grateful every day, and I don't think there's any one thing that's allowed me to do this. There's the gifts of what I've inherited and the work I've done on myself, and there's diet and exercise, that sort of thing. And but I basically have always had a kind of positive attitude of let's see what happens and let's see what my right relationship is to what happens. So whatever happens, I don't get distressed about it. I work with what it is. So that's seems like even though a lot of spiritual teachers have been teaching that for a long time, it seems like I got that at a very young age. It's just, stop belly aching about what you can't change and focus on what's right there that's real for you.
I remember, Susan, we had an exchange, and I just written my memoirs, which I sent to you, and you said, I don't think I can write mine because I haven't suffered enough. I haven't had terrible traumas in my life, and people only like to read about terrible traumas, so I can't write my memoirs.
Yeah, I did say that, something like that. It was half a joke, Serge. I was just too lazy to put in the work to refine the memoir. I wrote an autobiography, but I didn't want to publish it or put it out publicly. I let a few friends read it because I'm not that kind of a writer. I read yours. Yours was wonderful, Serge. I don't know. I just don't have that capacity to make words come alive other than the self-help kinds of things.
Well, Susan,
I write that kind of thing rather well and rather easily, but a memoir is a different thing. Takes a
well,
lot more work.
what touches me, I just asked you this last question, and then Steve will ask you something. What touches me is that you send out newsletters all the time, but they're not just giving advice, but you're sharing your own life, your own relationship issues, your own experiences with this. So you share yourself very publicly and very honestly. And of course, honesty is your big thing.
Yeah,
Susan.
that's my brand.
Yes, it's your brand. Yeah.
Well, I do share publicly in these little short blogs. I guess there's just something about writing a whole book about myself that I hold myself to a very high standard when trying to do that. And I have not arrived in my writing ability to be able to manifest that standard. So that's just, I'm usually not a perfectionist, but with regard to that project, it's on the back burner and I'll probably never publish it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Hi, Susan. Hi,
Hey,
nice to meet you.
Steve,
Lovely to meet you.
too.
Yeah. I was wondering. I was wondering about your background, and did you have any formative influences from your parents or from your peers who set you in this direction?
Well, I had adult parents. In other words, they were
Very
really
lucky.
ready to have children. They took parenting very seriously. They gave me a lot of guidance in values that the three of us all hold very dear, like caring for the sick and needy and vulnerable, that sort of thing. What some of us, good old-fashioned values, but what some of us might call the new paradigm, the interdependence paradigm and that sort of thing. Um, and and they were spiritually inclined. uh, in terms of just receiving the gift of life and trying to live the best life you can, not just for yourself, but for your fellow humans. You know, they were very service oriented, and they were just like super good people, and they built me up like, you know, you can do anything you want. That
Oh,
sort of
wonderful.
thing. Always praised me and thought I was the greatest,
Wow.
which
Great parents.
which is, you know, which can give you a little bit of overconfident um personality style. But that has done me very well because I've always taken a lot of risks and tried new things, and you know, I'm always into learning, don't mind failure. So I would say my parents were the biggest. And I'll just tell you one just small vignette. When I was 17, my mother took me to a lecture by Margaret Mead.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
And she kind of became one of the people that I most admired. And one of the things she said was women don't always have to have children to have a fulfilling life.
ah,
And I did not have children, but because I couldn't, it was an injury from the IUD birth control device. But that was really okay for me. And my children were all my projects and all my clients, and just, you
Yeah.
know,
yeah.
I'm in relationship with the world. And so I didn't have that
Oh,
um commitment to young people in that way that a lot of women do. And that freed up a lot of energy for creativity and service.
yeah. It reminds me, a couple of weeks ago, Serge and I were talking about Florence Nightingale. She's one of my heroes. A lot of people don't realize that she was a very spiritual person, a kind of mystic. And she made a conscious decision not to get married and have children because
Mhm,
she felt she had a mission to bring some healing to the world, you know, to
mhm.
make the world a better place in some way. So she was very aware that, you know, she didn't want to have children for that reason.
Yeah, I only became aware of that after I realized I couldn't have children.
Mm,
Then when I really let go of that idea, all of a sudden a whole bunch of new energy seemed to be available to me. It's like I was saving some of my uh, physical and emotional energy for that time when I would be a mother. You know, don't get too involved in your career and so forth. And then, you know, after about age 40, uh, things shifted for me.
wow, wow. So do you think your parents were a model of a good relationship, an authentic relationship?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
were. They
Mm.
had great sense of humor with, you know, kidded each other. You know, they were just, I often used to say to them, you're better people than I am.
Well, it's
And that was,
interesting.
you know, the reason was they gave almost so much of their money to causes, you know, whereas I was a little more selfish with my money.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, Susan, because I got into this work from exactly the other. I suffered so much through my parents that this is what got me into my work. But when we knew each other, I was still in a stage of recovery. I was still trying to find myself. You'd
Yeah.
found yourself, you know, you got your PhD at, you know, in your 20s, and you were sort of rocking and rolling when I knew you and we started that institute. But
Yeah.
sort of one thing that's interesting, I remember in a newsletter you wrote, you said, the best thing, I'm glad I got rid of my husbands, you know. You know, and so I imagine that
I think I
not
said, or maybe I said this in my autobiography. I believe in divorce.
yeah, no, that, well, I knew when you were married to Barry, and I
Mhm.
understood why that marriage didn't work. But um, but it's also as if you've been a free spirit, Susan. You know, I see you as a kind of um,
Mhm.
an embodiment of new womanhood. as a free spirit, pioneering new paradigms, new ways of being, new ways of relating. And I'm going to ask you some questions on that in a moment.
Well, I'll accept your story about me. I kind of like that story. That's one way I see myself.
Well, at least it's a story that agrees with how you see yourself.
Yeah.
Because so many of us are brought up with stories that have nothing to do with the way that we are. You know, I was brought up to be seen and not heard, you know, that I was just a little child, you know, who needed to be pushed away and the grown-ups were important.
Yeah, I was the center of attention. See, we're mirror opposites of each other. And still we made it to this place, Serge.
But Susan, I grew up pretty narcissistically, and you didn't. So that's interestingly.
Right. That's right. I got so much love that by the time my 3 brothers started to be born, because I was 7 before my parents had 3 brothers for me. I thought they were for me. I loved them dearly, like boom, boom, boom. And I was ready to be generous, to give. In fact, you know, even before age 7, I was just such a generous little kid. I also give away my toys, give away my clothes to the less fortunate people down the street, you know, stuff like that. That was, that whole other thing. I think it has to do with getting enough and then you're not needing it anymore.
It's funny. I had a developmental psychology class with my students. I'm a university lecturer a few weeks ago, and we were talking about Piaget, you know, the psychologist Piaget. He has this idea that young children cannot be empathic because they can't take other people's perspective. And therefore, young children are basically selfish and narcissistic. And so there are some transpersonal psychologists like Ken Wilber puts forward a similar view. But I don't think it's true. I think young children can be extremely kind and generous, like you've described.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those generalizations, a psychologist, you know, makes generalizations like Piaget.
Yeah,
so
and
it's kind of true of most kids.
Yeah, although more recent research has shown that children can be very kind. You know, they feel upset when other people are upset.
Oh, true.
So, yeah, I think it's a bit of a myth. I think that children are very selfish. I mean, obviously they can be selfish, but they can also be very generous.
Yes, I agree with you, Steve.
Well, Susan, when I knew you, you had written your breakthrough book, The Couple's Journey, 5 stages, and I sort of wrote about it in a book that I wrote in about 15 years ago, and I referred to it. That the first stage was romance. Then, if you get through the power struggle, and then you go into the power struggle, then you go into a place of realizing that you're 2 separate parts of one body. Then you go through into realizing that you're a unified body. And then the 5th stage is service.
That's right.
And I'm just wondering, how has this evolved over the years? I mean, sort of, has your model changed? Sort of, how do you work with relationships now? Because that very interesting thing that you sent me about delusion and curiosity, it was very interesting what you just sent me, that article. Yes. So how have your models of how you work with relationships evolved? And what's a spiritual relationship, or rather a deep relationship, if we can say that when we go deep, we become more spiritual?
Well, the couple's journey model, and there's a book that I wrote in 1980 called The Couple's Journey. I tried to put forth the idea of relationship as a spiritual journey where we refine some of the patterns of the ego through really becoming one system. You go through these different changes And like the power struggle stage sounds like it's a bad thing, there's conflict and so forth. But what you're doing during the power struggle stage is you're getting in touch with your shadow parts and each other's shadow parts. And then in the stability stage, you realize that you project a lot of your shadow onto your partner. And then in the commitment stage, you become a we system where you really do have at least with one other person, a kind of model of the oneness of all of us. And then in the co-creation stage, you're, like you said, service, you're giving back. I still stand by that model as a good developmental model of couples if you stay together long enough. Most relationships end at the power struggle stage, and they probably should, because the power struggle stage is for sorting out your differences and seeing if you're on the same path together.
Interesting perspective. Interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I mean, I emphasize mostly a couple relationship for learning and development and becoming part of the larger human evolution. As I have worked, though, that I basically wrote that book in my late 20s and it was published in my early 30s. But since then, I've developed more interest in what's going on in the shadow. So a lot of the work that I do with couples is shadow work. Basically, it's making the unconscious patterns more conscious. And one of the things that I've got interested in is the phenomenon of having intense emotional reactions to something that's unpleasant that you didn't expect, which we call triggering. People's reactive behaviors, that's pretty automatic, because when you see something that seems to threaten you, it threatens your ego, but it feels dangerous, emotionally dangerous. We either go into fight, flight, or freeze. It's just the way our nervous systems are wired to kind of scan for danger. And so if somebody says they don't like us, or they indicate criticism or trying to control us, things like that, well, depending on what you're sensitized to, what your fear complexes are, you'll go into a fear reaction of fight, flight, freeze. So I want to help people understand this whole phenomenon that's just built into the human nervous system. We can't help it. Nobody wants to get triggered. But that phenomenon really creates all kinds of misunderstandings, because what somebody says when they're triggered, they don't really mean it. They're like a cornered animal. They're scared and they're trying to fight back. And we hold on to what somebody said when they were triggered. We can't realize, and we can't have typically, unless we understand this phenomenon, we can't let go. Oh, you said you don't know why you ever married me. Well, he said that when he was triggered, and they don't know how to come back and say, I was triggered. It was probably my old fear of not being good enough coming up. I didn't mean that. I'm sorry, so forth. So that's something I find I have to teach couples now, and people in organizations and friends. And it's probably the cause of a lot of international conflicts too, because world leaders don't understand this phenomenon and they make important decisions when they're triggered. Should never make an important decision when you're triggered.
This is the spiritual
don't push send
work.
on that email.
Yeah. And Susan, this shadow work is the real spiritual work. It was Jung who said, if you want to do spiritual work, don't sit on top of the mountain in the sun, but go down into the shadow.
You mentioned international conflicts. It seems to me that a lot of conflict is about group identity, about people who identify with one group, and this group as opposed to the other group. And they have a whole history of bitterness and, adversarial relationships in the past. And in present day America, for example, there's a lot of division between the Republicans and the Democrats. You can also think about, Russians and Ukrainians, Palestinians and Jews. What do you think the best way to proceed, in terms of these conflicts is?
All right, I'll give you a perspective that I have, which is, and I mainly arrived at this through working with groups in corporations. Whenever you get with a group, and actually this is with two people too, like the couple's journey stages. There's after the group is together for a little while, they tend to polarize around some dimension of difference. There's some kind of developmental process in the way humans are constructed where we polarize. But it's for evolution, is the way I think of it. It's like same with the couple's journey. One person likes to make up quickly after a fight, and the other person needs space and time in order to begin to feel safe enough to talk again. It's just one example of that's just a little difference that you didn't even notice in the beginning, and then the whole relationship becomes about that. Why won't you talk to me? Okay, so that's just one. In groups, so often they'll be part of a group that I call them the fast changers and the slow changers. Let's say I was working with a school system and a group of teachers. One set of teachers say, oh, we don't want any of those new fads anymore, that human relations training. That's a waste of our time. We just want to focus on the 3 R's and the stuff we've always taught. And then there's another group, usually they're the younger teachers, who want to try the new things and innovate. So this is analogous to kind of the conservative and more progressive styles or camps in our society in general. And if you look at almost any society, and there's some kind of polarization around traditional values versus innovation and change. I mean, there's all kinds of other splits, like the haves and the have-nots, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the more emotional kinds of things that split people. And of course, there's long history in the Middle East about the Arabs and Israelis and so forth. I mean, but there's a phenomenon in human groups, and even a group of two, where you need to somehow do that. And the work, though, but people don't know how to do the work of getting to the next stage. We get stuck in that polarization stage, but there's something in that polarization where you guys have overlearned something that I have underlearned. Oh, it's not like either or. It's not like traditional values versus change and innovation. It's like the people who fear change need to learn something from the innovators, to try new things, to take risks, because that's the way you grow. But then the people who are always on the cutting edge of something, the early adopters, maybe they're a little impulsive sometime. Maybe they need to slow down. Maybe they need to learn a little from the conservative side and so forth. So I see things usually from the complex systems angle, and from an evolutionary angle. But Steve, we do seem to be stuck here in polarization, and even within ourselves. So, I now work mostly with couples and individuals, and I see, well, those same either or splits are within the self, the parts of me that are needy, uh, always needing reassurance, that kind of thing, for example, and the part that wants to appear secure and independent. We need to make room for all our parts, and that's what psychotherapy really is, making
allow the vulnerabilities.
Yeah, making the repressed, disowned parts, and we could make the analogy to the more vulnerable populations in our world, somehow making room for the isolated and the forgotten parts. So that's the work that most humans are doing right now, and societies are wrestling with that, at least.
So
How to integrate, how to create systems of mutual benefit. But we're stuck right now in polarization.
yeah, but you think potentially the polarities can lead to higher development, a higher integration.
Yes, I think that's the way of nature. But boy, humans have to find a way to attune with the natural laws again, because we're it's kind of distant, kind of separate from the workings of how humans and the natural world really work together.
It was Einstein who said that no problem could be solved at the level it exists at. So
Right.
how does one get to that higher reconciliatory place, Susan? Is that the soul? Is that the soul that is the great reconciler or integrator?
I don't know what different people mean by the soul, so I'm not going to answer that
Okay,
question.
sort of use another analogy.
That's a word, that means so many different things. But how do we get to
that higher integrator?
Next stage? Well, first we have to be able to experience pain and get out of the denial of pain. And I think pain is the great motivator to change. And I'm going to just focus on emotional pain right now, or the recognition that because the world is hurting, I'm hurting, or I'm hurting because I overeat all the time and I've got heart problems and joint problems and diabetes, So, but feeling what's really there that's painful is just one little key to beginning to say something needs to change here. And I think the unfortunate pain that's coming up right now, pretty soon at least, is the middle classes, not just in the US where I live, but the middle classes are being decimated, and we've got the very rich and the kind of the people who are struggling very hard. They're not poor by standards of the 1800s. They're still better off than a lot of people were economically, but the middle classes, or the people who are oppressed by the system that we're now forced to operate within, constant growth, depletion of resources, overconsumption. We're all kind of caught in that system. There's going to be more and more pain that's going to create more and more uprising and dissatisfaction, in order for us to somehow come to terms with the need for change. And maybe it'll be a climate emergency or something. I have no idea, but people, they say people are only motivated by crises to really change. I think we wouldn't need a crisis if we weren't so good at numbing our normal pain, which is just feedback that you're making a lousy decision, man. Change something about your behavior. Don't eat that third piece of pie, whatever. So our feedback loops within ourselves and within our systems are like not functioning very well. We have such a great ability to deny what we really ought to be feeling.
I mean, sort of what you're saying is reminding me again how important the emotional, psychological area is of the spiritual path.
Yes.
Because, for me, spirituality and psychology are part of each other. And the
Yeah.
real spiritual work is what you've been talking about. It's not learning to sit on a mountaintop and get high and say or
Mhm.
sort of moving into wonderful illumined states so that there is so much bliss. Or as one Hindu guru said to me, I will tell you how you can be in such joy that your father may drop down dead in front of you and you will feel no pain. I put up my hand and said, look, if I don't want that. If my father drops
That
down
kind of
dead, I want to feel pain. Pain
yeah.
is part of life.
Yeah.
And
And the spiritual work is to help us avoid, I mean, the genuine spiritual, help us to avoid needless suffering. The suffering where you just make up that because somebody walked out while you were talking, that they're bad or you're bad. I mean, that's like bullshit pain. But there's pain about real things that we
Yeah,
need to be
yeah.
able to distinguish um, you know, the pain of nature right now, for
Yeah,
example.
I think the great thing about spirituality for me personally is that I don't, you were talking about triggering earlier, and I
Yeah.
do sometimes get triggered in my relationship with my wife. We've been married for 25 years now. Sometimes I get triggered by my kids as well, but
Yes.
I'm aware of my being triggered, and I can
Yeah.
just sort of stand back and I kind of let it flow
Yeah.
by without responding to it. Even
Yeah.
if I notice some kind of emotional upheaval within myself,
Mm.
I don't get caught up in it.
Yeah. You
It,
know what? I counsel people because a lot of people need some help not getting caught up in it. So
mm,
I will counsel people to just don't don't take it like you don't act out your triggers is what you're saying.
yeah.
You can witness them. Oh, well, people who are mostly into acting out their triggers because they just can't help it, things happen so fast in the nervous system. I try to teach them to notice the early warning signals of when you're triggered. Oh, you're starting to feel like running out of the room, or you're starting to explain and defend yourself. See, sometimes people who are reasonable people don't think they're triggered. I'm just trying to explain. I'm just trying to be heard. You're
Mm,
probably triggered if you're doing that, at least some of the time. So start paying attention, owning your triggers, pausing, and having a pause agreement with your partner where you don't keep talking when you're triggered. And
mhm,
then do something to calm your nervous system, like self-soothing, breathing, to restore that nervous system safety. And then it's an opportunity for you to, once your nervous system is regulated, to go back and investigate what was it that she said that bothered me so much, that
mhm,
made me fly off the handle. Oh, she said, I don't think that's going to work. And I was offering my great idea for this great new project that would make our house so much better. And she said it wasn't going to work. And my ego got bruised.
mm,
But
mm,
deeper than that, it was a childhood wound about not being listened to, not being seen, heard, that sort of thing. And I can now tune in to the feeling that I had when I heard my wife and feel how that was between my father and me when I was 5, and
mm,
bring some tenderness and compassion to that shadow part of me, that part that's been in the shadows that I've been trying to deny and ignore, and reintegrate that sensitive, tender part of me, but in a way
mm,
that isn't so afraid of that kind of emotional pain, because that type of emotional pain isn't real and present, but it is useful because it shows you where you need healing from your
mm.
childhood wounds. Because almost all triggering has something to do with something that you didn't get in childhood. And it doesn't have to be a big trauma. Sometimes it's just neglect.
Yeah. And this helps us to understand other people, doesn't it? It helps us to empathize with other people.
Yeah.
There's somebody, I had a kind of insight a few days ago, actually. There's somebody in my kind of circle. I won't go into details in case other people might recognize who it is. But there's a person who most people I know don't like him at all. They feel kind of repelled by this person. But I spent a bit of time with him. And because I'd heard all these stories about him, I was sort of thinking, he's not a nice person. I want to stay away from him. But I spent time with him and I really kind of empathized with him. I saw this little boy inside him, this little
Yeah.
boy who'd been hurt and was trying to deal with his childhood pain. It made me really, have a different perspective on this guy.
Yeah. And when we can get to that point where we understand our own triggers enough and understand that process, we can kind of instantly forgive people when they're triggered and not take any of it personally and stay open-hearted, like you're talking about. That's possible. Sometimes you have to go through some painful psychological work to get there.
In that interview, no, in that article that you wrote about curiosity, you said, Susan, that we're too prone to go into generalizations and putting people into a compartment.
Yeah.
And and I realized, and I sent your email to my wife
Mm-hmm.
to read, because she once said to me, I don't need to listen to your talk, Serge, because I know you. And so I
Yeah.
sent that bit.
Good.
And I sent that to her. And I got an email back from her. Yes, you're absolutely right. That's why I'm reading your new book. Because it's absolutely true that she thinks that she knows me. And you said that if we do that, then the relationship goes stale and we
Yeah.
stop inquiring and we stop asking questions and we stop the investigative. Because
Yeah,
I guess
I admitted that, well, the article, just for our listeners here, was about curiosity
it's
and
great.
how we tend, couples especially, they think they know each other after they've been together 10, 20 years or more. Uh, and you begin to put your partner in a box, and then, oh, he's starting to say something. I know where this conversation is going, type of thing, and you stop listening. And I admitted that I do that too with my partner at present. I even though I can write and give advice to other people, when I was writing it, I realized, yeah, sometimes I don't want to ask any curiosity type questions, like tell me more or that sort of thing, because I want him to hurry up and finish so I can get back to what I was doing. And then I at least realize I don't do that too often, but that is a tendency among couples. And that I write these blogs for Substack, so that's what you're talking about. So read this blog if any of this sounds familiar, and send it to your partner if you think they've started
Great,
to put you in a box and stop listening to you.
great.
I'm glad
Yeah.
that I'm glad that article was useful, Serge.
Yeah.
It can happen with parents too, can't it? And I remember
Oh,
this feeling that I was taking my parents for granted. I wasn't really seeing them as real people. And then
yeah.
my father kind of shocked me by being a real person. I thought, wow, he shocked me
Oh.
by behaving sort of out of character. And I really saw him as a real person again.
I
And
love
it helps if we can let them behave out of character. The whole idea in what I call the getting real practices that I teach are being open to surprise. And if we have that open attitude, the father can kind of feel that. It can encourage the other person to step out of their stereotyped ways of being too sometimes. So, we live in an age of relationship where the relationship and how the other person behaves in relationship to you partly creates what you feel safe enough or permission to be. So it's not you don't control your partner by trying to control them, but by your attitude toward them, uh, that makes a difference in who they become around you. So I'm saying your father may have felt a certain openness in you, Steve, or that's a
Mm.
nice story anyway.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I was
Susan,
sorry,
no, no,
Serge.
no, Steve, go on. Yeah.
Oh, well, I was going to say that can being authentic be hurtful sometimes? Can it cause damage or pain? Because I noticed that I went through a period in my life when I decided to be honest with everybody. And I
Mhm.
ended up making a lot of people upset because so I stopped in the end because so many people were upset, you know. So,
Well, you can only be as honest as you are self-aware. And
mm,
so a lot of honesty is just letting your projections or your judgments fly with other people, giving your opinions. And the kind of honesty I teach is starts with self-awareness. Oh, like I'm I'm feeling this, and here's what I'm going to share with you. I'm feeling like um let's say somebody asks, you're in a dating situation, and somebody asks you for a date and you have to say no, my honest feeling. So, my honest feeling as I hear you ask me that question, do I want to meet you for a date, is I have some mixed feelings here because I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I like you. And at the same time, I don't think I want to continue anything with you. And now that I've said that, I'm really caring about how this lands with you. And yes, it does hurt sometimes. The
mm,
truth
mm,
will hurt. I don't want to live a kind of life that treats everybody like babies. So I treat this guy like an adult. And, this is a real example actually from my life. And we have a moment. He goes, "Yes, I am hurt." I said, "I don't, really, I hate saying something that I think might be hurtful." He said, he paused, and, "Yes, I am hurt." But we stayed engaged a little bit longer before we parted at this cocktail event. And just we had a moment of real human
mm,
connection, and I stayed with him when he was in his pain. And then we actually met by chance at another dating event, and it was like old friends
mm,
because we
right.
shared that moment. So I
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I want to inspire people to stay present with yourself and the other as you're being honest, and feel that connection both to self and other. And your honesty might have a more of a flavor of empathy and connection, even while
Mm,
you're speaking your truth. So many people find being honest is such a risky thing. They've held it in, and so they blurt it out in a way that's not
mm,
very self-aware, and they're not even in their bodies when they're saying it because they just want to get the words out and get out of there type of thing.
mm.
So we have to cultivate uh, authenticity and honesty as starting as a inner practice of noticing what
Yeah.
you know
And this,
what are how can I sort out my judgments and my opinions from feelings, which are not super significant either, but there's something that really happened versus judgments and opinions never happened.
mm,
It's in the mind.
yeah. Yeah.
what
It's,
what's real um versus what's a thought. We have to make
mm,
a
mm.
distinction. That's part of the honesty work.
Yeah, it strikes me that there's something very respectful about that kind of honesty that creates real intimacy.
Yeah, yeah,
And
I agree.
yeah, I think not being direct is kind of disrespectful. Not being honest is disrespectful, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah. And then, but sometimes you just don't have the skill level, and you're going to be hurtful. And so go ahead and shut up. That's fine too.
Mm, yeah,
Okay,
And
okay.
work on developing the skill to be
yeah.
skillfully and compassionately honest.
Mm,
Oh,
Possible. But hurt feelings will happen. And I think the whole world needs to get over our fear of emotional pain.
mm,
Emotion
yeah.
is not going to kill us, but we need to be able to be with the whole of the interaction.
Yeah, it can help us to grow. Pain does help us to grow.
Yeah.
It makes
You
us
know,
deeper and stronger.
I mean, we've called our podcast Fierce Grace because we both
Mm,
believe that it's pain that will help us evolve.
yes.
Susan, I'd like to move to a new phase that I think is really, really, really important, is that you said that you're interested, you're 85.
Yes.
You and I share sort of one thing that we're, as one friend of mine put it, in God's waiting room. And we hope that we'll be kept waiting for a little time or a long time longer.
Yeah.
But 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 I'm very interested in how are you preparing yourself and helping prepare others for this new stage in life's journey. In fact, I've just ordered your book on on sort of getting real, the 10 things of how to live in a real way.
Mhm.
Yeah. So sort of my question is, how are you preparing yourself for this
Mhm.
last stage in our journey, and how do you feel? Well, sort of answer it in whatever way you want to. I mean, how do you see old age as a spiritual journey?
So first, I feel great, and I know that I'm old, and I feel old in terms of what I've learned, like a little wiser and stuff. But I don't really feel uh, old, like you mentioned, people, not younger women not noticing you. Honestly, it's a relief for me to not have men noticing me. And just a personal thing too. I can dress sexier now. It's safer to dress sexier than when I was 30. I just thought thought just popped into my mind, but it's kind of like I don't um present, even, my skin is old and stuff like that, but I don't present as old. Um, but so that's just, just personal little aside. I'm lucky to not have any chronic pain. If I had pain in my body, I wouldn't be saying this. I wouldn't be as happy, I think. Emotional pain doesn't scare me, but physical pain sort of does. I had sciatica once, and I got over it, but that was nerve pain, and it was horrible. It really limited me. Um, so that's just a personal note. But I have um, been thinking a lot about what this stage is for what I want to bring to the world for teaching. And so I came up with this idea to write a blog and to give some webinars on the developmental tasks of the final stage of life, like coming to terms with the hand you were dealt and how you played that hand. That does seem to be one of the things that I think people at every age ought to be looking at, coming to terms with the hand you were dealt, the kind of childhood you had. Yours may have been more or less fortunate than others, and grieving the parts that you're sad about and appreciating what you did come away with from some of those unfortunate incidents maybe that you have experienced. So like the final stage of life is kind of an integration period. And I'm a conceptual person, and I, think in terms of what do people need to guide them into this final stage of life, especially emotionally and spiritually, because those are the things that I think about. And there's the typical things like completing your unfinished business with your loved ones and that sort of thing. But I wanted to really emphasize coming to terms with what life gave you and what you did and didn't get, and also the decisions you've made, the good ones, the bad ones, the not so, neither good nor bad, but things that shaped your life, and really taking responsibility for all of it. Even things you had no control over, you're still responsible for dealing with that because it's your life. So somehow I want to present this idea to the world, that there are still things we need to learn and do that are growthful in the last stage of life. And of course, coming to terms with loss of all kinds, loss of beauty, loss of physical strength, and all those things. And the one thing that I'm dealing with is my partner has cognitive decline. And so that, he's big, strong leader, confident type of a guy. And I'm still madly in love with him.
Mhm.
And he's not as sharp, and he loses things and forgets things and can't find his words and that sort of thing. So he's only at that stage. I mean, he can still drive, he can still cook a meal, he can still prune the trees in our yard. So he's still quite capable, except when he's kind of on stage to try to think of something.
So
So
what's your spiritual challenge
I'm writing
there?
about that.
Mhm.
The the spiritual challenge that I think would be true for most people is keeping your heart open when somebody is not as lovable, not as easy to be with as they used to be, And I don't seem to have that much problem. It is kind of an exercise in patience. And a lot of people, if you admit it, you're kind of impatient about, getting something that you want to have happen, you wanting it to happen. So that would be one of the big spiritual challenges of being with a person who has cognitive decline. I kind of figured it out at an earlier stage that I need to work on patience. So I'm ready for that challenge. And that was another reason I started writing, is teach people, if you handle your shadow material younger, it won't come back to bite you in the ass when you're 80 or 90. So handling things that are hard, developmental lessons like patience, which I highly recommend that everybody work on that now.
Yeah.
Because everybody gets slower, me gets slower as you get older, and you slow down. And there should be no bad or wrong associated with that. Frustrating, yes. Go ahead and be frustrated if that's your thing, but you do have an option of learning to accept what is, which is the work of every stage of human spiritual development, accepting what is, being wholly present to what is now. And that really helps you a lot when your partner gets cognitive decline. Because
Susan,
everything is just a new thing. Oh, well, here's a thing. I respond to that as the best way I can, rather than caught up in the mind stories of, well, it shouldn't be this way, or he used to be this, or why can't he? And those diseases of the mind don't don't start in old age. So I wanted to say to the general public listening, handle them now, because it's harder later.
do you find that being older, that you've grown out of some of your old issues? Because I found now that a lot of the things that used to upset me and plague me, without doing any therapy on them, in the last sort of 20 years, have fallen away. And so it's almost as if kind of naturally I've grown out of certain things. And I'm just wondering if it's because I've kind of tried to live the right kind of life. I've tried to, you know, live a decent and honest life and be kind to people and things like that, and to do service. And I'm wondering if you feel that the universe will serve us or will give to us if we do service work and give to it.
Well, it may not be just if we're good people and do service work. I did a lot of work with junkies in jail, and it seems like after about age 50, they've outgrown their addictions. They didn't do any work.
Mm.
Their physiology changed and they're not addicted anymore. So that's just, just something for us spiritual people
Yeah,
to be hopeful about. Maybe
yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't, maybe it's
But
um
we grow out of our
maybe
patterns.
my own personal answer to your question, I haven't noticed any growing out of patterns uh due to aging that I can name. Um, Seems like most of my patterns I had to pay some attention to and do some inner work with. Um, but honestly, I I'm not that
Mm.
focused on my own personal growth at this point.
Yeah.
There is some
I'm
there's
just
some
I'm just here.
yeah, there's some interesting research in psychology that suggests that old age can be a natural process of spiritual development. That older people do become more spiritual, even if they don't try to be. They just
I
tend to let
Yeah,
go of things and they become
Mhm.
more
yeah.
present.
I think I saw that in my father for sure. Uh, when he became less um able, he became more loving. Uh, whatever that's about.
Mm, mm.
I just don't apply that to myself at this stage. Maybe
Yeah, I've
maybe
just
I'm not
published
old.
I've just published a new paper on different kinds of purpose. And so I talk about a transpersonal purpose, and there's also an altruistic purpose and a self-accumulative purpose when you try to get more money and more success. But
Yeah.
I found in my research that as people get older, they tend to move towards a transpersonal purpose where, they're not focused on accumulating. They become more kind of, more selfless, if you like.
No, no, that makes sense as long as you're one of the haves. If you're one of
Mm,
the
yeah,
have-nots, I don't know about that. I think economic instability doesn't uh,
It's terrible.
it
yeah,
just
that's
it
true.
makes it
Yeah,
hard to spiritually evolve, frankly, and that's the sad thing about our system, that we don't take
yeah.
most
That's true.
vulnerable.
Yeah, the sample in our research was mainly American and British people, you know, probably middle
Yeah,
class people.
educated,
Mm,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Susan, do you believe death is the end, or do you believe in good glory, hallelujah style that our souls are going to go marching on?
Well, I don't know, but I have an intuition. That's all I can say, because I won't call it a belief. I'm not much of a believer. But I do have an intuition that um, the energy of some of us uh, remains as some kind of a spiritual force in the universe. We have added something to the human equation,
Mhm.
let's say. Uh, and I'm imagining that not all souls um, leave much of an energy impact, and they may even leave some of a negative energy impact.
Mhm.
But I don't have a cosmology around what happens after we die. I've read a lot about it, the different levels and so forth.
Mhm.
I just don't know though. And
Mm.
there's a lot of evidence for reincarnation. And I believe in it just because of that. but because I don't have any,
Mm,
even myself, a deep intuition about that, even though I've had memories of past lives, I
mm.
actually have. But
Is that the evidence you're talking about? The children who remember incidents
yeah,
and
who
details from their
remember,
previous lives?
that's, well, there's that, and there's
Yeah.
people who died and come back and reported. And
Mm,
so there's
mm.
a lot of evidence
Yeah.
for reincarnation. I
I
don't,
agree.
I wouldn't dispute it, because it seems a lot of it is well done research. But I myself don't seem to focus much on the afterlife or what happens there. It's just a
Yeah.
style.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about Matthew Fox. I went to a talk by Matthew Fox, and he's a Christian. And somebody put their hand up and says, "What do you think about the afterlife, Matthew?" And he said, "Once we get this life sorted, then we can think about the afterlife." I thought that
Uh-huh.
was a good
We all
answer.
have our different, we might be spiritual teachers, but we all have our different personalities and our different flavors that we transmit. So you can see mine is a pragmatic flavor.
Mm, mm,
I'll tell you, I have a little sort of fantasy, born out of having read a lot of near-death experiences, that
Mm.
you go down the tunnel of light and then you meet your old friends and your
Hmm.
relationships.
Hmm.
And and I kind of thought, well, I'm kind of looking forward to that. If that's going to happen, I'll go down and I'll meet all those people whom I used to be fond of, and I'll say hi there. That's a little fantasy I have.
Well, Serge, I've sat with a couple people on their deathbed, and they have reported. I mean, one of my ex-boyfriend's mothers, I was with her, and she said she was meeting my mother on the other side, and because I don't know what's really going on with people on their deathbed, but a lot of times, they go in and out and in and out. And
yeah, yeah.
said, I just met your mother and we had a talk.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So something goes on that has people believing that thing about all the
Mm,
friends will
mm.
greet you when you get to the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I had a friend who worked as an intensive care nurse, and she said that they always knew when people were going to die because they would start talking about relatives and they would say, "Oh, so and so's here to wait. He's waiting to greet me," and they would know
Yeah,
that they were going to die within a few hours.
yeah. And just who knows what that is, but there's
Mm,
some chemical process that goes on that apparently helps people cross over sometimes, even though for many people it's very hard to cross over because I've been with some of those. They just can't die, but they want to. But there's these chemical processes that I think, like DMT is the molecule that they say
Yes.
it's
maybe.
really right before death,
Mm,
and that creates certain perceptions, like a psychedelic trips, it creates certain perceptions or allows certain information to come through that was always there, but our brains shut it out.
mm,
That's what they say about LSD, for example.
mm.
But this deserves further research.
Yeah.
I
And
think, yeah,
sorry, Steve.
Steve, sorry.
No, no, you carry on. I was just going to say that we're moving towards the end of our
Yeah.
hour together. But do you want to say something else, Serge?
Um, I was actually just going to make the remark that it's interesting about the whole new evolution of psychedelia, of how it's sort of emerging in the world, and and it almost seems as if, as humanity is evolving further, we're needing to go down deeper into the
Yeah,
shadow. But this is a whole,
yeah,
this is a whole other 5 hour talk,
yeah,
so
Yeah.
we won't
yeah.
get into it now.
No.
And I know that you've had some experiences with DMT, MR2, which I have as well. So, so,
Mm,
so we share that, Susan.
mm.
So,
Yeah.
Steve,
Oh yeah. I was going to say, Susan, we normally end our podcasts with a couple of very quick fire questions. First one is, who was your most influential teacher, the person or teacher who inspired you most?
Fritz Perls.
Hmm. What about your most inspirational or influential book?
The Master Game by Robert Durop.
Hmm. And I don't know that book. I'll have to look that up. And what about music? What is your most inspirational piece of music?
Well, there's a lot there, but I'm thinking of an LSD trip I took when I think Days of Future Past. Is that the Pink Floyd
Pink
Oh,
Floyd,
or
Moody Blues.
Moody
the
Blues?
Moody
Yeah,
Blues.
Moody Blues.
yeah,
Oh,
one of those.
I'll
One of
have to look
those,
that up.
but that just keeps coming back to me. That and my first LSD trip, Mass in B minor, was
Ah,
a choreograph. I did one of those guided, well, I did three of them, guided LSD trips, and they choreographed. So Mass in B minor might be something that really is deep, deep with
right.
me. Bach.
And last question, the most beautiful place that you could recommend us to visit?
Snorkeling in Bora Bora on LSD.
Wow. I will definitely try that.
Okay,
Without,
Susan, right. Okay.
without LSD.
With or without LSD.
The coral reefs that used to be in our oceans that a lot of them have gone now. I have those images, and so that makes me sad to remember
Yeah.
because most of them are not there anymore.
Where is Bora Bora?
It's in the South Pacific near Tahiti,
Oh, right. Okay. Beautiful.
French Polynesia.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Susan. It was really beautiful to speak to you. I've learned a lot and it's been very inspiring.
It's been fantastic to see you again, dear Susan.
Yes, thanks for inviting me. I've really enjoyed our
It
conversation.
was really nice. And
Me
Susan,
too.
we'll stay in touch.
Yes, I love that we have stayed in touch all
Yes.
these years.
And
We'll
I
keep
just want to say
doing
it's
it.
really that there's something about old friends, friends from the past. It
Yeah.
holds a special kind of link. You
I,
know, I
mhm.
hold a special kind of link because we had a very special coming together.
Yeah.
You and Barry and me and Marcus. And
Mhm.
do you remember?
Oh,
The
sure.
wonderful Institute for the Study of Conscious Evolution. It was so important to me.
It
It was a
was.
wonderful thing that we
Yeah.
were all part of.
Beautiful. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Serge.
Thank you. Thank
Bye
you,
bye.
Steve.
All the
Bye,
best.
Susan. Bye.